Okay, let's talk stolen bases. We've talked about all of the different resolutions of balls between the batter and pitcher. Let's get into some situations where runners are on base and what can happen there. So let's say the Dodgers are batting, and let's say that Steve Garvey is at the plate. And let's say that his teammate Davey Lopes is on first base. And the Dodgers are facing Padres left-hander Randy Jones, the junk man. You can see his card there. And let's say the catcher for the Padres is Bob Barton. Okay, so Garvey at the plate, Lopes at first, Jones on the mound, Barton behind the plate. Those are your protagonists here. So it's a two-step process in box seat baseball. So let's look at the charts first. You have a chart for checking for a jump. Then you have below that a balk pickoff chart. Then you have two charts for stolen base success. So this is what you're going to roll against to determine if the stolen base attempt is successful if the runner gets the jump. You've got one for modern seasons, 1990 to the present, and one for classic seasons, anything prior to 1990. It's a little bit easier to steal base in the modern seasons than in the classic seasons. Okay, then you have a chart for stealing home. We won't really go into that. You've got a couple of charts that just show essentially what to do to check for an error, which you will do twice. And then you've got a chart for the catcher's arm here, which is going to be really important. And then the last thing you have over here is a steal error chart, steal error check chart. Okay. Two-step process. First thing you need to determine is, does the runner get the jump? Okay, that's this chart here. And you have a chart for second base, and you have a chart for third base. It's a lot harder to get a jump when trying to steal third. So the first thing you'll do is when you want to check for a jump, you're going to roll the white, the black, and the red dice. And remember that whenever that red is a 0, it's going to be a chance for an error. And on the jump, it's going to be a chance for an error on the pitcher trying to pick the runner off first base. Okay, so you have a dice roll, 66 and 0. So you're going to check on Lopes' card, the runner, and you're going to look at his SBF rating. All batters / base runners and all pitchers have two stolen base ratings. SBF stands for stolen base frequency, and SBR is stolen base rate. So the frequency is the likelihood of Lopes getting a jump, and the rate is the likelihood of him being successful if he does get the jump. So Lopes stole a lot of bases in 1974. So he's going to get a lot of jumps, and so his SBF rating is extremely high, 7. Okay. So remember, though, he's not stealing in isolation. There's a pitcher on the mound who's got the baseball, and he can do something about it. So Randy Jones has an SBF of 0, and that makes it a little bit easier because you're not adding or subtracting anything. But if this were a positive or negative number, you would either add it or subtract it to Lopes' rating of 7. So the number is 7 for the likelihood of a jump. And you're going to go to this jump chart, and unfortunately I rolled a 66, which is the only number that Lopes would not get the jump to steal second base. Anything 11 to 65 would be a chance for him to steal. Okay, but let's say we rolled 65. Okay, and he's going to get the jump. And again, Lopes is going to get the jump, literally 35 times out of 36 against Randy Jones, who's got a 0. Okay, now you're going to find out, does he get there successfully? So let's go down to Lopes' card again. Stolen base rate of 1. That's the number that's important to look for here. And Jones is a 0. Okay, so you have a 1 and a 0. But can't forget about another person who's involved in the stolen base attempt, and that's the catcher, Bob Barton. He's got an arm. He's going to use that arm to try to throw out Lopes. So, he's an A arm, which is the best. Catcher's arm ratings are A, B, C, D, or E. A the best, E the worst, and C is bang average. So, Barton's got a good arm, and he's going to try to use it to throw out loops. So the catcher's arm is, the factor is right here. And if the catcher's arm is an A, -2, E +2, and then you can see B, C, and D everywhere in between. So Barton's arm is an A, that's -2. Jones's stolen base rate is 0, and Lopes's is 1. So you're going to take the 1 from Lopes, and then you're going to take the average of the pitcher and the catcher, and it explains it right here. You compare the base runner's SBR rating, and then you add the average of the pitcher's SBR rating and the catcher's arm rating. So we'll go through it one more time again. Lopes is a 1, Jones is a 0, Barton's A is a -2. So 0 and -2 averages to -1. So 1 plus -1 is 0. We're in a classic season. So that's 0. We have to roll between 16 and 45 for Lopes to be safe. Now, what happens if it's lower or higher? Because you can see that there's boundaries. Okay. If it's 46 or higher, Lopes is out. Barton has thrown him out, and he's down. So that's easy. Okay. If you have an 11 or 12, you have a potential balk or pickoff. If you have a 13, you also have a potential balk or pickoff. And then if you have a 14 or 15, you have a stolen base with a possible E2. Okay, so let's take all of these as well. If you rolled an 11 or 12, you would look at the red die against this chart. And in Jones's case, he's fair, which is right in the middle. And here's those ratings: excellent, very good, fair, mediocre, and poor. Anybody poor is going to have a balk. Anybody excellent is going to have a pickoff. And in this case, for Jones, it would be 0 to 4 would be a pickoff, and 5 to 9 would be a balk. So that's what happens on an 11 or 12. If it's a 13, it only matters if the pitcher is excellent or poor. And if he's excellent, it's a pickoff. If he's poor, it's a balk. If he's neither of those, it's just a stolen base. 13 would be a stolen base unless the pitcher has an excellent or poor pickoff balk rating. Okay, that's 13. 14 or 15 would be a stolen base and a possible error if the catcher is a 0 error rating. There's other ways you can make an error on the throw, but this 14 and 15 really accounts for those who've made a lot of errors. And if you roll 14 or 15, regardless of what the red die is, then you're going to look and see if the catcher's rating is a 0. Barton's is a 0. So if you rolled a 14 or 15, Lopes would not only steal second, but he'd end up on third because of the throwing error on Barton. Okay. Then anything 16 to 45, he's safe. Anything 46 to 66, he's out. Okay, that's the procedure, but then there's also a couple of places where you need to check for an error. When you are rolling against the jump chart, you roll the red, and if you get a 0 and an even number, 2, 4, 6 on the black die, then you have a potential error on the pitcher. If you roll a 0 on the red when you go for the steal, and you don't have this 14 or 15, any other number above 13, you then have a possible error on the catcher. And in both of those cases, you're going to roll the green and red against this steal error check chart. So this could come up against the pitcher, it could come up against the catcher. Jones' error rating is 12. Barton's error rating, as we mentioned, is 0. And so that allows for some extra errors here on 14 or 15. But when you roll the green and the red, you read it as a 2-digit number. And if you remember from my video on errors, you actually look at this chart in reverse. What combination do the green and red fall within? Now let's just roll them. And we got 70. So 70 falls between 70 and 74. And that means that the catcher's error rating or the pitcher's error rating, depending on which role you're talking about, needs to be 15 or better. And with a 70, both Jones and Barton fall below that. And so they would make an error. If it were on the jump check, then error on the pitcher, Lopes would go to second. If it were on the steal attempt, error on the catcher, and Lopes would safely steal second and go to third. So you have to kind of get some practice with the different number combinations. You know, here's Lopes, who's going to get a lot of jumps. Jimmy Wynn is a 1. He's going to get his fair number of jumps. Steve Garvey doesn't steal a lot of bases. He's a -1. So he's not going to get as many jumps as the other two are. Here's Randy Jones. He gives up about an average number of steal attempts, and it's about average that they're successful. His teammate Steve Arlen, SPF is -1, so he takes some chances away, and he's going to take a lot of steals away because his SBR is -3. So if you get a jump on him, be careful what you wish for, because you might get thrown out. Likewise, different catchers. If you have Barton with an A paired with Arlen -3, you got a -3 and a -2. That's -2.5. And if Lopes were the base runner, 1 -2.5 is -1.5, and his chances go down to 16 to 36 versus the 16 to 45 that he would have against Jones and Barton. You know, here's another Padres catcher, Fred Kendall. He's a C, and then remember that's a 0. So he doesn't throw out as many base runners as Barton did. If you have Kendall C and Jones is 0, then you've got a 0 against Lopes' 1. Now his chances increase. They go to 16 to 52. So a much better chance. Kendall's error rating is 3, so he doesn't commit as many errors as Barton does, although that's still a pretty poor error rating. So you have a lot of different combinations here, but the key is, first thing is check for a jump using the SBF of the runner and the pitcher. And if you get the jump, then you're going to check the SBR of the runner, and you're going to match that up against the SBR of the pitcher and the arm of the catcher. You average those two, and then you take it to this chart. And remember to check for an error when the red die is 0 in either situation. Okay, I just want to show you one more thing. And again, this is why I really like the limited flip cards. Each card comes with, in the upper left corner, you can see a couple of things in red there. You have +2 and you have NA. So the first is if you want to do auto stealing, this +2 would be the jump number that's required for the runner to successfully get the jump to steal second. And then the in the parentheses would be for third. And so in this case, if you have a +2 combination, then the runner would get the jump. Well, remember, 7 for Lopes, 0 for Jones, that's 7, that's +7. He's going to get the jump there because that's better than +2. He would not get a jump to try to steal third. NA means not available or not applicable, so no chance to steal third. Another card here, you've got +1, +6. So, of course, again, Lopes would get the jump to steal second, and in this case, he would get the jump to steal third because 7 is greater than +6, and so he's able to get the jump to try to steal third. You know, even Jimmy Wynn, with his +1, would get the jump to steal second with this card because +1 and 0 is +1, and he meets the threshold to be able to get the jump. So that is a way to eliminate that first dice roll. By looking at the flip card and looking at the jump number needed to be able to get the jump. So I use these to determine that, and then if he does get the jump, I always send him. There are some parameters for when you shouldn't try to steal based on the inning and the spread of runs between the team, and I follow those. But let's say it's the first inning and you're trying to establish a lead, I would send the runner, and then I would roll the white, black, and red, and compare it to this chart using the pitcher's SBR and the catcher's arm rating. And of course, on the red 0, check for an error. So that is the stolen base procedure in a nutshell. Kind of a big nutshell, but it's a very good process. Like everything with box seat baseball. It's well thought out. It incorporates all the elements that you see when you're trying to steal a base in baseball. And again, you just have to get some practice using it. So hopefully this video helped you with that. Thanks for watching.